Hey, Walter Sorrells back with more tips for the knife maker. Today, grinding problems and how to fix them. So one of the first problems that novice knife makers run into when they're first starting to work with a belt grinder is what I call faceting. So basically what happens is when you start working on a belt grinder, you start grinding across here, trying to work on these bevels, and what'll tend to happen is that you get a bevel and then you get another one and your angles keep changing and you can't pull all those little facets into line and make them into one smooth, good, clean looking bevel. So the first thing is there's a tendency when you first use a grinder, you're sort of nervous about it, but you want to give it enough respect because it can chew up your knuckles. And so people will either go in really lightly and just stab at it, or they'll go in super heavy and just grind away. Neither one of those is quite right. Now, this is a feel thing, and it'll take you a little while to get it, but what I always try to do is this. I want to get the knife right up close to the belt, and I just sort of let the belt bump into that to the bevel, to the edge. I don't want to hit the spine, I want to hit the edge, and I just feather it in there. Now I've got reasonably firm pressure and I'm in a reasonably flat place. And what I want to do is be able to feel the first time I start to cut a bevel on there. I want to go from one end to the other, stop, pull it off, cool the blade down, see what I'm looking at, and then that second time that I touch, and the third and the fourth and the 10th, I want to be able to feel that bevel get flat on the platen of the grinder, and then move it across here. If I go in too hard, what's going to happen is I'm going to establish another bevel. And each time you establish that bevel, you start to feel like, ooh, I think I'm on it. And then you go grabbing across there and you end up with something that's not clean. So feel that bevel, get right up on the plunge line, pull it across in one clean, smooth stroke. So let me just show you real quick how that looks. Where I'm feeling that flat, I'll come over to this corner, and across. Now I have a pretty good edge. So the last point on keeping that clean bevel with no faceting is to start from this corner right here at the plunge line, put a little extra pressure right there on the corner. I'm not meaning dig it in hard. You're still flat on there, but there's just a little more pressure. You're putting a little pressure with this hand, maybe a little pressure with that thumb, and then one side all the way to the other. All right, so another problem is overgrinding the tips. If you start here and you work across and then you rotate the blade in, what happens is it's pretty easy to maintain a flat right here, because once you establish that flat, you can just hold it and it wants to stay on there. But the closer you get to the tip, the less that's in contact with the belt, and the more sort of tippy it gets. And so if you've got any pressure in your hands or any tension in your hands, it's likely to roll the blade a little bit, and that bevel's going to get offline. You want that bevel to be the exact same angle with respect to the center line of the knife from one end to the other. So we came up with a name for this. Kevin and I did this week because he was having problems with it. We were calling it Kawasakiing. In other words, I'm exaggerating here, but what he was doing as he got to the tip was rolling it this way. So I always talk about this when I talk about grinding fundamentals. You want to keep your hands relaxed and your elbows to your sides. I want my body to be as locked in as possible so that my hands don't get all floppy and wobbly. If I can just keep everything where it is and move my body, this angle is necessarily going to stay the same. So I just become more and more conscious of that as I get towards the tip. And what I do is I actually pull, I'm exaggerating here, but I actually pull the back part of the, the tang side of the blade off here. So what I'm doing is I'm not changing the angle here with respect to the center line. I'm actually rolling it in like that. Angle's the same, it just rolls in. So it goes like so, across, and I'm using my body to angle this back out. I'm exaggerating, but I'm pulling it out like that, using my body to just pull the knife off of there. My hands, my fingers, none of those are doing much of anything. Let me jump in here to mention that today's video is sponsored by Combat Abrasives. They're a family-owned American manufacturer offering a wide selection of belts. Now, I've used many of their belts, including ceramic, aluminum oxide, and zirconium. The prices are good, and their focus is specifically on the knife-making community. Their basic aluminum oxide belts come in at a good price point and last a lot longer than some of the inexpensive belts that I've used in the past. Another thing that I've really been excited about is their ceramic belts for roughing in the 40, 60, and 120 grit range. Their performance is very competitive with the big manufacturers at about half the price. So check out their online shop by clicking the link in the description. Okay, so another common problem that a lot of people run into, sometimes people call it 2-inch bump or various other names, but what happens is that you have a nice clean grind line across there except for one little bump where it goes up, and that bump is 2 inches exactly from the edge of the plunge line. So here's what causes 2-inch bump. Any rotation of the knife, not even coming off the belt, but just a slight change in pressure on the ends, on the corners of this belt are going to cause extra grinding, extra abrasion in that particular area. So we want to focus on that plunge line, and we get all slap happy there, and we're pushing it in there trying to work on this plunge line and get it to do whatever it is we're trying to get it to do. And what happens is this, as you hit the plunge line, the knife wants to jump up like that. And when it jumps up, it naturally contacts the blade only right there, and that grinds a little divot out of here, takes a chunk out of your grind line, and now your grind line looks like crap. So how do you fix that? It's basically a matter of awareness. When you come in there to work that plunge line, and again, I'm exaggerating, but what you want to do is rock the knife a little bit. If you're watching me grind this, you're not going to actually see the knife come off the belt. But if you could graph the pressure or something, what you would see is that as I get closer to here, there's more and more pressure here and less there. So it's kind of a feel thing, and again, I'm sort of exaggerating it, but as you reach that plunge line, you want to get the knife, you want to get the pressure of the belt and the platen concentrated here and not here. And then once you work your way back out, again, you feather that pressure so that it's consistent all the way across the blade, and that'll give you a nice clean finish and a nice clean grind line. All right, so let's just say you did it, you screwed it up, there it is, you got a problem. There are a couple things that you can do. First, you can just keep grinding, be more careful, and raise that grind line up. But what I'm going to show you here is kind of a fix for two different problems that you might run into. One is that 2-inch bump right here, but the other is what I call sag. What can happen is that you overcompensate right here, and the grind line climbs up a little too far towards the spine, and then it sort of droops down like this, and then when it comes to the end, so it's deep here, drooping down, again I'm exaggerating of course, and then it comes back up and meets here. Now, one way to fix this is just to be nice and even and regrind the thing, or keep grinding it and pull it up. But something that I like to do is, I advocate as just a normal practice, feather it in, start from that plunge line, move all the way across. But what can happen when you do that is that sometimes you end up just grinding away too much here. You can't get this little piece in the middle. It just becomes this kind of, you're just chasing things and pushing things too far, and you still end up with this little sag area, or maybe with that 2-inch bump on a longer knife that's just in a place that you kind of can't get to it real easily. So what I recommend doing is, if you're trying to work out problems with that grind line, instead of starting from here, feather it in, use that flat to come out towards this end, towards the tip, and then push in harder, and then soften it up, soften it up, soften it up as you get back towards here. So what that does is it starts moving your grind line on this end, but not on this end. And so what it allows you to do is to keep harder, harder, easier, easier. And so you're taking off a lot more material in this section of the knife and not right here. And what that'll allow you to do is eventually to drive the whole thing up in a consistent way, make it nice and even. On that last pass, come back from this end, zoop one time across there, and you'll have a nice clean line. All right, 2 more quick problems. The first one is grinding into the spine, and this is real easy when when you're first starting grinding, but it can happen even to experienced knife makers. And the thinner that the knife is, the more you're prone to do this. And what it is you're grinding away, and you look and you see, oh, my grind line ran all the way up to the spine. There's really only one solution for fixing that, and that is to go back and grind the entire knife flat again. Now, there are a lot of different ways to do it. In a perfect world, you have a surface grinder, you throw it on the surface grinder, you take off a few thou, and you got a nice perfect surface again. Most folks who are just getting started probably don't have a surface grinder. So there's a tendency to do this and just go across there and try and flatten everything out on the platen to just remove all those scratches so that you can kind of start over on your grind line. Not really a good idea, and here's why. As you move across here, you're changing from this big fat surface area to a really skinny one, and just all kinds of stuff can go wrong here. You can push too hard and exaggerate all this divot that you've taken out of there. You can turn it over this way and mess up your grind line. You can rock it this way and cut into your spine. Just a really bad idea. But if you go this way, down the face of the platen, and just move it up and down like this, you can take off a little meat there, just enough. You're not having to take off very much in most cases. Usually when you take a little divot out of the spine, it's just a few thousandths deep. You can clean that up and get started again. It's not perfect, it's not perfect, but most of the time it'll get you back in the game. Now, what if you got the opposite problem? You cut into the edge too far. Well, in some ways this is a worse problem, because usually if you cut into the spine here, up close to the spine, you can just take off a few thousandths and you're good. Down here, if you really get aggressive, you could all of a sudden go a 1/16 of an inch, and maybe that's just, too far and you can't fix it. But a lot of times you go just a little too far. Here's a way of fixing it. Basically what you want to do is just remake this edge. Now, of course, it's going to change the design of your knife a little bit, but hey, you screwed up and you're going to have to pay the price. So here's what I typically do. If the design of the knife allows it, I'll run it down the face of the belt like this, And what that'll do is give me a nice, smooth, clean edge. You know, if I try and come in here and just take off a little bit of extra here, I'll tend to kind of screw up the look of that edge. But if I can start here and just work all the way down, that's going to give me a nice, smooth curve. So let's see what that looks like. So you can see nice little shiny edge there. That's where I've taken off that extra. It really doesn't take too much. Just a little dab will do you here. You'd be surprised how much fatter you can get that edge by just moving it a little bit, and it won't necessarily really screw up that your overall design. If you can't come back this way, maybe you've got a little protrusion here, finger holes, or choils or whatever it might be, something that's going to kind of get in the way of working it this way. Of course, you can always go this way. So I hope I hit a lot of the really basic kinds of grinding flaws that people have when they first get started. If you have a little bit of technique, a little sense of where it is that you're trying to go, a lot of these things that might seem pretty nasty when they happen to you can actually be fixed with a pretty simple technical fix. Just kind of have to know where you're going. Hope this was helpful, guys. I may do kind of a follow-up to this in a few months, see if I can find some other typical problems that people run into, but I think we really hit some of the most common ones right here. All right, guys, we'll see you soon. Thanks for watching, guys. If you feel like you got something out of this video, don't forget to subscribe. Also, click on the link to Patreon for a great way to give back to the channel. Plus, check me out on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Links in the description. If you want something sharp and pointy, maybe a gift for yourself or one of the cooler people in your life, check out my Tactics Armory website and pick up one of our tactical or outdoor knives. And finally, if you want to learn to make hamones or Japanese swords, check out WalterSorrellsBlades.com, where you can find videos about how I make hamones, as well as forging, mounting, polishing, and fittings for Japanese swords. Thanks, and see you soon.